To all our guests and participants, welcome to the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals webinar on PPP and technology innovation in the water sector. My name is Yang Villa. I am a member of WAPPP based in Manila and the head of the Philippines for IL Utilities. I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. Now, I'd love to know where our participants are joining, so please type into the chat box your respective locations, and I'd love to hear where you are joining from. So I am joining from Manila. We've got Monder from Tunisia, Joe from Dubai, from Madrid, Croatia, Beijing, Indonesia, Johannesburg, Guinea. Wonderful. India. Thank you all for joining. Truly a global session we've got today. Please keep them coming so we have a very good idea of the geographic representation that we have for our session. We've got an exciting discussion for you today, and we hope that the perspectives that you will hear will answer key questions such as, what are the trends in water sector innovation, particularly in digital transformation? Are PPPs really delivering on the promise of technology innovation? And what are the enabling factors to promote innovation among water PPPs? To open our program, I'd like to call Dr. Monica Altamirano, head of the Water and Natural Infrastructure chapter of WAPPP. Monica?
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for some. Thank you so much, Yang, for the kind introduction. As Yang said, we're really delighted to have you here. This has been a joint effort of the Asia Pacific and Europe regional chapters, and the chapter where Yan and myself are, the Water and Natural Infrastructure. I think that as the Glasgow negotiations for the COP have come to an end, many are disappointed or they're a bit more hopeful, but I think we could all agree that advancing towards a net zero carbon and resilient provision and management of water services and getting access to those water services to everyone is an important point of action and very concrete short-term action. So I think today's discussion, like it has been discussed very much recently, the effects of climate change, are being felt through the water cycle, most of them, and are being felt already now. So we know in the years ahead to come that uncertainty is kind of like given, and the increasing number of extreme events ask us to really make changes now. And that's where we need to take into account this in planning our investments in our water infrastructures, and where we hope that the digital transformation could help us. But I will leave the rest of this discussion and introductions to today's webinar to Jan. Thank you very much to all the speakers for joining us, and of course, all the people who is joining us from these different regions. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Thank you, Monica, for that welcome. And as we've mentioned, we will hear from 3 speakers for 10 minutes each. Please, throughout the presentations, I urge our audience to type their questions or comments into the chat box or the Q&A box, and we will pick up these questions during the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. Now, here's how we have structured today's speakers. We will first hear about a water utilities experience with technology innovation, particularly on digital transformation. And then we will zoom out to look at the development of PPP programs and projects in a regional setting. Finally, we will hear more about opportunities in the digital space that could support the water sector and what this might mean for PPPs. Once again, to our newcomers to the session, please introduce yourselves and your location in the chat box. And throughout the presentations, please feel free to leave your questions or comments. Our first speaker is Dr. Francisco Castillo, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Maynilad Water Services, the private utility serving the west zone of metropolitan Manila and the largest water utility in the Philippines, serving over 9 million people. In 2013, he was named Outstanding ASEAN CIO by IDG and in 2016 was voted Best ASEAN CIO during the ASEAN Strategy Forum in Singapore. He's the author of the book entitled Managing Information Technology, published by Springer Germany in 2016, and is also an adjunct professor at the Asian Institute of Management. My former colleague in Maynilad, Sir Kiko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yang, for that introduction. Let me share my screen, my slides. Okay, so hi, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I'll be talking today about something a little bit off from the main, PPP, but it's all about digital transformation, one of these buzzwords that is very popular nowadays. I speak to you as CIO of Maynilad Water, and I will actually show you some demos of what we have done. But first, let me just add to what Yang mentioned. We serve 9 million people, approximately, the west zone of Metro Manila and Cavite. Our company is an example of a PPP because it's actually a concession by the government, and we serve 17 cities and municipalities, both in water and sewerage. Now, just to give you an idea, this digital transformation started way back, even when digital transformation was not a popular word. Way back in 2011, we started by putting the different systems that support, in terms of transactions, our business. One of the first things we did is what we call on-site billing, wherein we can read the meter on-site and produce the bill right there and then. In 2014, we started automating all our plants, meaning to say our water treatment plants, sewage treatment plants. We also productized our read and bill, the on-site billing system, and we actually have sold it to a few customers, also water and electric utilities. And then we also underwent, especially with the pandemic, this got accelerated, was the emulation of plants before we actually deploy the control mechanism. So we can actually simulate how the plant will react via the use of a digital twin. Those are the transactional systems. On the analytics side, we also initiated a number of them. First and foremost was the regular reporting, business intelligence, starting with the commercial, then we went to logistics, and last was HR. And way back in 2011, we also initiated to capture all our different sensor information, equipment information, via an IoT platform. These two systems have been in existence for 10 years, and this has actually given us a very rich source of data that we can now use to do analytics. For example, we have initiated the analytics project, which is to study how the weather patterns and other information affect the turbidity of our water before it reaches our plant. So we have a weather forecasting system, and together with the different sensors that we have in the IoT, we are now better able to predict how this will happen. This is a picture of our central control room. And to give you an idea of the kind of things that our operators are accessing, here they can see the flow and the pressure of water along our pipes. We can also see here the location of our vehicles. They are all using GPS. So that helps if there's an emergency maintenance, they can dispatch the nearest vehicle to the site. This is our major reservoir, which caters to about 70% of the water, so it's also displayed there. And some of the more critical plants with the details can be seen. The operator feels that he needs to access a specific plant. He can do so from his console, and be able to see all the details and even override the control mechanism that is in by default at the plant. On the right side, we have the sewerage team, and they actually built a set of KPIs, which at one glance can easily tell them how the business is going, whether they have an issue or not. Let me show you real world, the actual demo of these systems, so you can believe that it's actually true. So this is the dashboard we see for the IoT platform. Here we can see different displays, and on the left we can see all the different facilities that we can actually monitor. So you can see there as it scrolls, different facilities, and we can choose one. So for example, this is a dashboard showing non-revenue water, showing the consumption per area. And we can say, hey, I want to see the production at one of the water treatment plants in million of liters per day, as you saw here, 880. We can select the dams, so we can see the level of the dam. Here in red, we see the actual level today versus previous years. We can select that and actually get more exact numbers by displaying here the coordinates. So everything shown here is a dynamic point. It stores historicals up to years, even up the second level if we need it. This is a reverse osmosis microfiltration plant. You can see most of the key indicators, including the level of the reservoir, the differential pressure on the filters, the condition of the pumps, if it has stopped, if it's running, if it's in auto. And we can also click on, for example, the differential pressure on one of the filters and get a more detailed view. So this
Apologies,
is an example.
Francisco, we cannot see the demo slides that you are showing.
I'm sorry.
Is it possible to reshare your screen?
Yeah, so from the very start?
Yes, please. As soon as you click IoT platform, we could still see the samples slide.
Wait a minute. Yeah, I think I have to reshare. Okay, so let's go back. There you go. I'll have to repeat myself. So this is, can you see this now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is the displays I was telling you about. Here on the left, we have the different facilities, and we can have the displays, right? So as we scroll, we can see for different facilities, the different displays. We can select. This is showing the non-revenue water. Here, we also see the consumption per area, and this is the production of a plant. You can see here, 880 million liters a day. We can go see the level of the dam here in red. This is the current versus previous years. We can select today's, this year's level, and we can actually see the coordinates, right? So if we need to zoom in, we can actually see the actual values. Next, this is one of our reverse osmosis microfiltration plants. You can see all the main indicators summarized here. You see the condition of the pumps, whether they're started, stopped, the differential pressure, the RO, right, the level of the reservoir, and we can select one specific filter and display there the differential pressure. You can see here it goes down every so often. This is when there's a cleaning procedure, right, on the filter. We can also see here, this is a sewage treatment plant and all the lift stations leading to it. And if we select the level of one lift station, we can see here the level of the sewerage. We can change also the scale. So there, if you change it to 1 day, 7 days, right? You can see the profile. And this is the pressure along a pipe, which is near my house. That's why I always monitor this. And you can see that here there was a disruption because we had about a month ago a large interruption because of a pipe replacement, right? And same thing, you can change the scale, you can go back in time, and you can see even years and years of data, right? So that's the demo I wanted to show. So I will go back. Now, the second thing I wanted to show is about what we call the automatic customer communication. So let me reshare. Our automatic customer communication is actually a system designed to, let me share, designed to inform customers of interruptions. So here is how we define the interruption. We put a description. In this case, it's a planned interruption, but this also works for unplanned, right? Type of maintenance activity and the areas affected. We also put the start, ending date, and it registers as one of the scheduled interruptions. We can search for it, and when we select it, we can actually see it displayed on our map. So here in red, in this polygon, you see all those affected by this interruption, and you can see here he's clicking and it displays the different customers affected. So now what we do is we extract all these customers from the database and send them an SMS informing them about the interruption. And this message is predefined based on the type of interaction, start and end date, and there's actually no need to do any manual intervention. So this actually speeds up the whole process of customer service. And the last system that I wanted to show you here is how we've interfaced our IoT platform, Internet of Things platform, with our maintenance system. So the maintenance, we call this computerized maintenance management system, consists of, I will show you. So this is a representation of a pumping station, and we are monitoring here the vibration of one of the bearings of the pump. So we can actually set a threshold. When that bearing goes above the threshold, then that means there's something wrong with that particular pump bearing. So this is the pump, and we can simulate an incident. Let me scroll faster. And here we will see that the threshold is breached and we get a high vibration alarm. Now what happens is this is automatically interfaced to our maintenance system, and it will create a notification order automatically in SAP. See, these are the notification orders, all the alarms, because of very high vibration. It could be something else. It could be high temperature, high pressure, right? And finally, here are the details of the notification order, including the equipment number. So if we go to SAP, we can see the details, and this is automatically routed for maintenance personnel to actually service that. So let me just end with a few parting words. So we've seen some examples. The other thing that's very important nowadays is IT security. And IT security, especially with this pandemic, means that you don't leave all your defenses to just one thing. So one of the concepts we use is what we call layered defenses. It means that if something fails, one of your defenses fails, you still have another one to address it. And this really spans everything from phishing simulation, meaning to say awareness by personnel of phishing emails, because that's the typical way things get in. And then all the way to the backup, which is the last resort if everything failed. The other concept that we're using is what we call zero trust concept, which means that you don't trust the user by default, even if he has the proper login and password, but you do more validations, like two-factor authentication, or you verify the digital certificate on his device, etc., before you give access and privileges to that user. So with that, I end my presentation, just a few words, and I would say that, you know, being in a developed country is not a reason why innovation cannot flourish. In the Philippines is not a fully developed country, and yet, you know, with technology, it's really only our minds which are the limit to the bounds of what we can do. And I constantly remind my staff about this. And with that, maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francisco. What a great way to kick off the session. It's really interesting to see advancements in digital technology, especially because the water sector is often seen as slow in digital uptake and transformation, especially on the customer-facing side. We'll be discussing these issues and details during the Q&A session, and I encourage our participants to please type their comments or questions on the chat box or Q&A box. From the utility perspective, the next angle we'll look at is international development financing and regional programming. Hisaka Kimura is the advisor to the Private Sector Operations Department and East Asia Head of Infrastructure Finance at the Asian Development Bank. She has over 25 years of experience in arranging finance for natural resources, renewable energy, water, and municipal environmental infrastructure projects in various countries, including East Asia, Russia, Central and Eastern Europe. Currently based in Beijing, Hisaka oversees the entire project cycle covering country partnership strategy, business development, structuring, negotiation, implementation, regulatory monitoring, and knowledge sharing. She builds and manages relationships with key clients, co-financiers, and governments. Hisaka-san, welcome to the session.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. I'm really excited to be here and also share our views, because topic is very close to my heart. I've been truly excited with emerging technologies that can yield transformative solutions. Actually, we, Asian Development Bank, just had a successful 80-day event to facilitate such a solution and the best practice for resilient and inclusive water delivery. Digitalization is one of the key pillars. I feel COVID-19 accelerated the application of digitalization process as they become more crucial. We aim to leverage financing, partnership, and capacity development on the ground. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'll begin with overview of Asian Development Bank. About 3,500 staff work from 40 field offices across Asia and the Pacific. Annual operation volume is about $31 billion US. We plan to expand our support to public-private partnership and the private sector participation. Next slide, please. Under one corporate umbrella, we serve to both public sector and also private sector clients. Here is a quick overview of full spectrum of our client, from policymakers to investors. Please take a look at different shades of blue. Let me start with light blue at the bottom, sector level support. Alongside with long-standing policy advice to the government, we support bridging the knowledge gap among different parties with our publication and capacity building. Moving up to the middle, we promote public-private partnership and help the government in selecting and tendering the project. As you know, public debt in emerging market has surged to level not seen in 50 years, yet there is a huge financial gap to meet sustainable development goals. Developing countries in Asia and the Pacific would need $1.7 trillion US annually and a broad range of solutions, including private sectors, to meet the goals. With relying more on private sector, the government can free up significant amount of fund to its crucial expenditure related to social concerns such as pandemic response. In my last slide, I'll explain ADB's advisory service more. Moving up to the top, In dark blue, non-sovereign operations. We directly finance project, utility, financial institution, and private equity fund. In addition, we arrange co-financing with commercial banks and institutional investors. Next slide, please. Thank you. Climate resilience. Water is a primary medium which we feel the effect of climate change, as Monica introduced in the very beginning. Tackling climate change, building resilience, and enhancing sustainability is one of 7 operational priorities of our long-term strategy 2030. We aim to deliver $100 billion in cumulative climate financing between 2019 and 2030, including $34 billion dedicated to adaptation projects. In every project we finance, we actively support design solutions. Here are some examples from our recent project: smart water technology, improve operational overall efficiency, detect and react incident and leakage, monitor water quantity and quality, and climate and disaster resilient technique to absorb urban runoff and mitigate flooding, such as separated stormwater collection system and sponge city. In addition to adaptive design for climate resilience structures, it's also important to prepare adaptation plans based on both transition and physical risk assessment, such as physical climate scenario analysis of RCP 8.5 coverage water stress and coastal flood risk assessment of the asset. Next slide, please. Thank you. Following COVID-19, our project are facing a new type of uncertainty in addition to climate change. We observed a mixed impact on demand. Domestic household demand for safe water remained robust, but water demand for commercial and industry use decreased during lockdown. In terms of operation, our water and wastewater project continue essential service with some adjustments such as additional support to vulnerable people, enhance staff safety, increase water quality, testing frequency and locations. And the digital solution played a crucial role to remotely run continuous operation and customer interfaces, such as invoicing and payment. Also, it's accelerated application of automation process as they become ever more crucial. However, new private sector projects and the PPP development and finance were impacted by some new normal, such as longer lead time to obtain approval or license, and the supply chain and logistic disruption caused some delay in construction and maintenance. End-user payment moratorium deferring water and sanitation bill caused increasing working capital requirement, and some delay in commercial banks approval process. To respond, we increased finance. Our most recent project include water supply project to ensure tap water, which can be drinkable, and also about $200 million climate resilient smart water infrastructure, and $300 million river and lake rehabilitation, $40 million green bond to upgrade water and sanitation in Georgia, and $80 million to support utility owned by the city in Vietnam, and $35 million wastewater treatment upgrade along Yellow River in China. In addition to direct loan, ADB offers transaction advisory to the city, most recently in Uzbekistan to test PPP. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is my last slide. I'd like to talk about upstream effort for public-private partnership initiative. It's often said that PPP in water sector is difficult. Several countries, the central government initial focus was given to large-scale power generation projects with sovereign guarantee on offtake. But water is much close to people. Size of water infrastructure is much smaller than other type of infrastructure. Water is a key element of basic human needs. There is no alternative. The local condition varies. Water tariff setting and construction plan is typically under city government responsibility. Even under city government, water and wastewater were often under different authorities. Sometimes pipeline networks belong to other agents, such as local entity owned by the city governments. These silos, together with price sensitivity, made private sector investment in water sector more challenging. On the other hand, I personally witnessed a domino effect. A successful pilot project encouraged more water utility and government to try new solutions to involve private sector participation. For example, concession type typically scope to be just a single asset, such as water treatment plant in defined area. But infrastructure is a system. Economic benefit and operational efficiency would be higher if series of facilities, such as multiple water treatment plant and the smart water network and the reuse facility, even sludge treatment facility, to be bundled and designed all together. We have been actively financing this type of PPP to enhance climate resilience and also facilitate lake and river rehabilitation. With quickly evolving PPP ecosystem and agency, it's crucial for ADB to provide continuous and ever-present policy advice in each country. So country focus is very important. And also advisory on sector-specific regulation is equally important. Let me highlight 2 initiatives. First, a guidance note on mainstreaming water resilience, an operational roadmap to integrate climate resilience into water sector in planning and policy development in the Asia and the Pacific. Second, technical assistance platform to support our developing member countries become water secure and resilient. Digitalization is one of the key pillars. The challenge remains that deliverability and not availability in our view. Technology has to be adapted by the project sponsor, city planner to be replicated. ADB's role is to connect key stakeholders to multiply impact. We hope to help pilot project and scale up. Now, I'd like to conclude by saying it's a long journey requesting collective wisdom. We look forward to working together with you and wide range of private sector as a project sponsor, financial, and also source of innovation. Thank you so much again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hisaka. Indeed, the top-level agenda and financing opportunities shapes the kinds of technology innovation that happens in the water sector. And I'm personally particularly thrilled to hear that $34 billion out of the $100 billion funding is earmarked for climate adaptation. Perhaps we could talk about that more in the Q&A. Our final speaker will delve into private investment and opportunities in the digital water space. Geoff Gage is managing partner at Amane Advisors, a boutique advisory firm focused on the water and waste sectors. He's a former partner at McKinsey & Company, where he led McKinsey's global water practice. Geoff leads Amane's work in digital, helping clients understand the impact and opportunity of the shift to digital, as well as assessing over 1,400 digital solutions for the water sector. Geoff, thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for the invitation. I will share a few pages. So maybe just starting with a little bit of a vision for what a fully digitally enabled water utility could look like. And interestingly, we actually had some fantastic examples in the 2 previous presentations which fit in here. But imagine, for example, if I pick the one at the top, a self-adaptive, artificially intelligence-driven optimization of wastewater systems, for example, or a truly seamless digital field force with access to all the information you need, real-time rescheduling, for example, or the automated sewer network responding in real time to rainfall events to eliminate pollution events. There's a few more examples on here, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what is possible, and importantly, what is actually possible today rather than in the future. So for example, we heard about the personalized customer service from Francisco and the tailored alerts based upon events, right? So each one of the things that are shared on here, whether it is robotics that can go through your pipes to detect leaks, or whether it is satellite information to help you monitor critical infrastructure, all exist today. So the question then becomes, what is it that is really driving some of the digital adoption, and what is preventing a little bit of it? So in my view, the number one concern is around aging infrastructure. And water utilities in particular have more invested infrastructure than either gas or electric. They tend to be older, aging. A lot of that infrastructure is underground. It's very hard to see it. It's much harder to operate than something that is above ground and visible. The second is around COVID-19, and as Hisaka-san mentioned, COVID-19 has really accelerated digital adoption. My local utility here in the UK said that they implemented a planned program that they thought was going to take 2 years to give everybody mobile access to data, etc. They implemented it in less than 10 days when COVID hit, because they realized everyone was going to have to work from home. They had to have that access. Climate change and extreme weather, clearly, having a much bigger event, both the availability and the scarcity of water, but also too much water at the wrong time, the flooding implications in stormwater management. And as we'll see in a minute, there's been a transformation in IoT and the cost of data in 5G, allowing for much more connected systems, much more powerful computing. And there are some challenges, for example, around fragmentation. So Maynilad is an interesting example of a utility at scale. In many countries, utilities are much smaller. And digital, though, quite interesting, I think, goes beyond some of the kind of the widely reported programs to actually address some of the things that are talked about less often. So if I connect two things on this page, the third one down on the left, the aging workforce. So when we talk to utility leaders, one of their concerns is that the workforce is steadily aging, and those people have got an incredible amount of knowledge. How do I capture that knowledge, the understanding of how my system operates, what that event was likely to have been before they leave? And at the same time, on the right, staff motivation. So my personal view is that becoming more digital is also a great way of attracting a new generation of engineers and operators, and younger people who are frankly more excited to work in a more digital world, and also frankly have some expectation of a certain sort of level because they see it in their home life and they want to see a similar level of digitization in the work life. So I think digital addresses a lot of explicit and open problems, but also a lot of things which are actually very good for organizations on the right-hand side. And if we think about where the benefits are, we ran a survey about 2 years ago with just under 100 utilities. What I was fascinated to see is that utility leaders see digital as a way of becoming more proactive, more predictive. So it's not necessarily about cost reduction. It is about how do I know when something has happened and be able to react to it, as in the example Francisco said, where you can instantly send text messages to alert customers before they have phoned you to tell you there is a problem, and be able to kind of manage those events in real time, and then use the digital information to really think about extending asset lifetime, right? It's more about those things than it is around, for example, reducing the cost of energy or chemicals, or importantly, labor costs. I think that's something that's important if you work in a utility to understand what the drivers are, why people are doing this. I think on the industrial side, if you think about kind of industrial water and wastewater treatment plants, it is more driven by cost savings and regulatory compliance. And the assets tend to be above ground, they're newer, they're more discrete. So there's a little bit of different drivers on both sides. And if you look back just across the last 8 years, we've seen an explosion of data. Right? So we went back, we looked at a few facts and figures. That the cost of IoT sensors is down 46%. The cost of data storage is down 98%. It's virtually free at scale. And the cost of AWS cloud computing is down about 72%. So suddenly you don't have to choose what data am I going to pick, where am I going to store it, how much am I going to keep, what do I do with it? you suddenly have a lot more data. I won't say information because it hasn't been analyzed at this point, but there's just a ton of data that you can keep for a much longer period. And at the same time, there is a huge choice of digital solutions. We've looked across about 1,400 solutions. And if you think about the different sort of layers of digital, from sensors, and I mentioned that the reducing cost of IoT solutions, the automation, the control, managing data and visualizing it, communicating and connecting all of this together. So actually, I think one of the hardest choices, if you're a utility leader, is actually working out what digital solution, how's it going to integrate, how's it going to fit together, because there are just so many solutions out there. And I think this is driven by diversity of customers. Different utilities have different needs. It's pretty easy nowadays, actually, to set up a digital solution. Right? There's a lot of information sources. You can set up some analytics on the back end. And so at the same time, there's a lot of entrepreneurs creating things in this space. But if I was a utility, I might be a little bit overwhelmed with the number of solutions coming to me, working out, which one do I put in front of my operators, because they can't look at 20 different solutions, right? So these integrated solutions that pull together insights from new hardware, from new analytics, I think are the ones that are going to help, as in the OSI Soft example we saw earlier. And so whilst there's a huge potential, there's a lot of tech, there's a lot of companies out there. Digital implementation is actually still a work in progress. So this is an example taken from the US, from the American Waterworks Association. So 80% of the utilities replied say they have SCADA in place, and there's another maybe 15% that are still implementing it. But if I think about something like CMMS, which again, Francisco mentioned, only 40% of the utilities have that in place. So there's a bit of a gap between digital adoption of some of the things here, which are kind of more platform solutions and kind of more enablers, and some of the cool and exciting digital things I mentioned right up at the front on the digital page. And I think importantly, if you think about PPPs specifically, and this involvement of both private and public sector, and if you think about it either for an individual asset, like a desalination plant, or if you think about it at utility scale, I think there are huge benefits of digital, both in construction and during operation and management. So on the construction side, using digital solutions, optimizing the design engineering, helping manage the whole construction process typically leads to a lower cost of construction, fewer overruns and delays, there's less risk for private investors, there's a greater efficiency then for developers and operators. And on the operation and management, from a financial investor side, digital can give you transparency, reassurance on commitments to stakeholders and regulators. It can help optimize the return on investment. So if you think about where to finance replacement of pipes, for example, right? Digital solutions can help you really optimize that. And for developers and operators, digital drives both efficiency on the operations, the asset management, also reputational benefits, the customer engagement, the stakeholder view of your utility. So I just wanted to sort of explicitly show the benefits to both investors and developers and operators, and they fit together very neatly. So that was my last page. I'll just pause there. Huge amount of opportunity, lots of excitement, lots of benefits that are both explicit and kind of implicit within a utility. More to be done on supporting implementation, partly because the choice of solutions is so complicated, but lots of benefits to both investors and operators. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Geoff. That's a great overview of the trends, as well as a forward-looking perspective on the water sector and PPP markets and what they might look like in the future. A lot of it dependent on the concept of the digital and smart utility. We are now ready for the Q&A portion, and I would like to request our participants, having heard from our three speakers, to please type in their questions in the Q&A box, and we'd be happy to hear your other comments in the chat box as well. We've got one question from Irina asking, do digital solutions make water services more accessible for vulnerable communities? Not addressed to any specific speaker. Feel free to please go and answer this question. Shall we hear first from Francisco? What do you think of this question? Does it make more water services more accessible for vulnerable communities?
Well, it's a bit difficult to answer directly. I mean, it all depends on what you use, right? But based on our experience, we were privatized long ago. Well, at least the concession, and we started off with a pretty bad water network and a very minimal sewerage network. So the first things, of course, are replacing pipes and beefing up your water sources, water treatment plants, etc. But the thing is, there's a point where, of course, reducing losses, right? There's a point where, yes, given that, for example, you want to reduce losses, what more can you do? Of course, if you have huge water leaks, then that's the first thing to address. But in terms of now using technology to help you drive further efficiencies, then that's where it helps. So indirectly, I would say that it does help making it more accessible for vulnerable communities, right? Because if you improve, for example, water pressure, and then it extends also to that community. I don't know if Geoff, you want to add to that.
And I think that's a core principle of why I still work in water, which is a benefit to one is a benefit to all. And that is really why I'm still in the water sector after 20 years, which is a mere 20 years compared to many people's experience here. But that sense of, if you can use digital to improve a utility in any way, right, those benefits flow to everybody and allows you to reinvest for vulnerable communities. Digital is also helpful for more sort of decentralized solutions. So if you imagine sort of, solar powered groundwater pumps with kind of, distinct kind of controllers and things and connected to micropayment systems. So you can now kind of put in a small infrastructure solution out in a kind of more remote community and still actually have a financing model for it that works through mobile technology or another solution. Right? And I think that's also interesting and exciting as well in terms of bringing clean, safe water to communities.
Yeah, I'd like to also echo excitement. I have observed several technology and also business model in 3 layers, having some technology to enhance access of water to vulnerable people. First level is well. The traditional well can be enhanced with digital solution to monitor water flow and also quality, water quality. This was one of the technology exhibited in our recent e-marketplace. Second area is community. As Geoff mentioned, in fact, community can have small networks among, like a village level, and then those water distribution and also wastewater treatment is challenging, but with appropriate technology, operation and maintenance can be automated, and then solution can be under the ground, and then remotely operate and also maintenance those solutions. That's the second level. And the third level is the citywide network. I observed some efficiency improvement by connecting a lot of mini grid around the city in a large city networks. By doing so, actually water tariff in those suburban area decrease. And also there's economy of scale and also technology, because it's data. So if amount of data is larger, in fact, there would be more efficiency gain. So in short, I see huge potential, and also application, of course, would be different by type, local condition, and also some other condition. But this is area we really want to expand our operation.
Interesting insights. I think what we're hearing is, yes, there is potential for technology, appropriate technology, to help the vulnerable communities, and not only by lowering tariffs, making it more affordable, but also making operations more efficient. There is a question on the chat box, interestingly, about a technology that has been floating around, and does it help in the water sector? Can blockchain technology help? Go ahead, Francisco.
Yeah, well, it's very relevant. I actually teach a course on blockchain at the Asian Institute of Management. This is really just not my main work, but so blockchain is an upcoming technology. I mean, we've all heard about the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ether, all that, but blockchain is more than that, right? So what direction that will take, it's not very clear because it's still at a very early stage, but it will definitely touch on every industry. I mean, not just water. And for example, it's being used by some of the more advanced companies right now in terms of tracking logistics, right? So I think what's happening now is that, this is being developed, but there will come a point where, blockchain will be transparent to us. We use it, we don't even realize. So that when we make, for example, an order of equipment, right, or chemicals or whatever, we can actually track the exact status and all the details needed via blockchain. But it still has some years to come. But I think it will touch everything. Yeah.
I think where we do see it today is on kind of trading, water rights, things like that. And there's some sort of pilot schemes on that where, that's a case where you're making kind of transactions between different individuals, different organizations, and everybody wants to have some confidence on it.
Hisaka, is this part of, is it in ADB's horizon to use blockchain technology, not just for the water business, but also for, say, climate change?
Yes, of course. We have been very closely following up the digital solution, but I have nothing to add because Francesco and Geoff covered very well. Thank you.
Thank you all. Lots of potential, too early to tell, and we'll see what happens in the future. We've got a question from Olivier on reporting. Do you see an increased requirement by the public sector, by the government, to share the benefit of digital innovation on their PPP asset and pushing towards micromanagement or reporting on operation and maintenance? Would any of our, perhaps Francisco, what have you noticed in terms of, say, your relationship with the regulator? What have been the regulatory drivers? And does this mean increased transparency with your regulator?
Well, yes. In fact, I presented the IoT platform. When we started that, I think maybe in 2013 or 2014, we actually gave access to the regulator on this. And actually, they appreciated it. Once you give access, it's impossible to take it away, right? So every time they see the pressure dropping, I mean, we get a call, right? And we have to explain. So that was a big difference we felt, right? And now they're pushing it to the other concessionaire. So I think that's a good thing. I mean, it increases transparency. It makes things, makes them more aware, right? I mean, you can't lie. The data is there. Yeah.
That's good to hear. We've got a question on how digitalization upgrade projects for existing utilities are typically financed at present. Do utilities use their own funds? Are bank loans being accessed? Is it through leasing? Through what kinds of financing models do we see in the market? Hisaka, would you like to comment on this, what you have seen in the countries you work in?
Sure, it's very important question, but actually it would take maybe more than 5 minutes to explain. But in short, it really depends on the borrower. I mean, depends on the utility, whether utility is owned by the government or pure private sector company or PPP company. And also depending on the degree of technology, how much capital expenditure would be needed, or it's just a part of rehabilitation plan. And then whether that utility has access to sovereign loan, because some utility in a strategic important area, central government may list up that project as a part of a sovereign loan package. In such case, they can have access to concessional loan. Maybe that would be cheapest option, or I mean cost competitive option. But if entity doesn't have access to such financial resources, then either they can borrow directly from local commercial banks, or if technology is really cutting edge and then there is no technical evaluation possible by local community, and then multilateral development banks such as ADB is willing to take a role to assess technology risk and then provide long-term finance for CapEx expansion or any other capacity development and then any need. Sorry for my long answer, but it really depends on the entity. And then if you have any specific example or some coming project, please let us know.
Geoff, you wanted to add?
I was just going to say two things. I think one is that at least the utilities I work with typically feed this through the CapEx side of their budgeting plans, right? So then the sort of the finances one step behind that, but we don't see very much sort of supplier funded solutions, right? The digital solutions are a little harder to remove. The second thing is, and again, at least in sort of mid to smaller utilities, it's not just a question of funding. It's also having the capacity to make a decision, to do the integration, to put solutions in. So one thing I hear quite often is, that's great. Can you guys come and actually install it and set it up and run it? And if you can, we can get the money for it. That's not a problem, right? It's sometimes more just a sort of a physical capacity, because in a smaller utility, you don't just wear one hat. You've got 20 different hats, and one day you're this role, and the next day you're this role, and you're having to juggle a lot of things as well.
Thank you all for those insights. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for Q&A. I have taken note of the unanswered questions, and we'll be circulating this to our 3 speakers and posting them on the WAPP LinkedIn as well as through email if we can reach you. On that note, I'd like to thank our excellent speakers for sharing their time and expertise with us. And of course, to all our participants for not just joining, but also engaging with us today. Special thanks also to my colleagues from WAPP. That would be Levin, Monica, as well as Andrea for supporting this webinar. We will be publishing this WAPP webinar on YouTube as well as LinkedIn pages, so you can take a look back at the session's highlights or share this webinar to your colleagues. In closing, I'm happy to note that WAPP will continue to organize these kinds of knowledge sharing sessions for the advancement of PPP and technology innovation across various sectors. And if you are interested in being part of our fast growing and dynamic global organization, please visit the WAPP website or LinkedIn page. We'd be delighted to hear from you. From all of us at WAPP, thank you very much. Please keep safe and have a great day to all. Thank you.